My beloved child, God says. Don't scroll. If this message found you today, it wasn't an accident. Stay until the end because there is something about your soulmate that you were never supposed to discover this way. Something happened behind closed doors, something involving a decision that looked final, permanent, and impossible to reverse. Your soulmate signed divorce papers. They put their name on a document that seemed to close one chapter of their life forever. But then, just when everyone around them thought the matter was finished, they did something nobody expected. They picked up a pen again and wrote one single line about you. And that one line revealed what had been living inside their heart all along. My child, you may have been wondering why your soulmate became distant, why their energy changed, why they stopped explaining themselves, why some days they seemed close to reaching out, and then suddenly disappeared again. You may have questioned whether they had forgotten you, whether someone else had taken your place, or whether the connection between you was only something you imagined. But there are things happening beyond what your eyes can see. Your soulmate has been standing at an emotional crossroads, and the choice they made recently was not made lightly. There was pressure around them. There were conversations they did not tell you about. There were people who believed they knew what was best for your soulmate, and there was a life they had been trying to maintain even though their heart had already begun moving in another direction. For a long time, they tried to convince themselves that they could continue living the way everyone expected. They tried to be responsible. They tried to keep peace. They tried to make decisions based on obligation instead of emotion. But eventually, something inside them broke. Not in the way you might think. It was not necessarily one dramatic argument or one explosive moment. It was the slow realization that they could no longer pretend their heart was somewhere it wasn't. And that realization brought your name back into their thoughts. My child, there was a moment when your soulmate looked at those papers and understood that signing them would change everything. Their hand may have hesitated. Their mind may have raced through memories. They may have remembered the moments they spent with you, the conversations they never finished, the words they wanted to say but never had the courage to speak. And then they signed. The room became quiet. People may have thought the decision was about ending something. But inside your soulmate, another realization was beginning. They were not simply ending a relationship. They were ending a version of themselves that had been living according to fear. They were finally admitting that pretending was no longer possible. And then came the part nobody expected. After signing the papers, your soulmate was given a moment alone. They could have walked away. They could have thrown the pen down and left. They could have focused on their future and forgotten everything connected to the past. Instead, they stayed there for a moment and wrote something about you. One line. just one line. But that line carried more emotion than an entire conversation could have contained. It was not written for attention. It was not written to impress anyone. It was written because your soulmate needed to put the truth somewhere outside their own mind. They needed to see the words in front of them because keeping everything inside had become too painful. And my child, the line was connected to one thought they could never completely erase: you. You were not just a memory to them. You represented something they believed they had lost because of timing, fear, circumstances, or choices they made before they understood what they truly wanted. They remembered how you made them feel when they were around you. They remembered the peace they felt in moments when they did not have to pretend. They remembered your voice, your presence, the little things you probably never realized they noticed. And suddenly, after everything was signed, your soulmate understood something painful. They had spent too much time running away from a feeling that refused to disappear. My child, perhaps you have felt this connection even without communication. Perhaps there have been moments when your mind suddenly went back to them for no obvious reason. Perhaps you woke up thinking about them. Perhaps a familiar song reminded you of them. Perhaps you felt an unexpected emotional wave and could not understand where it came from. Do not assume every feeling is proof of a specific event, but recognize that unresolved emotions can remain powerful long after people stop speaking. Your soulmate has their own emotional journey, and right now that journey is forcing them to confront truths they avoided. The divorce papers were not the end of the story. They were the moment your soulmate could no longer hide behind the life they had been maintaining. And the line they wrote about you became a confession they were not yet brave enough to say directly to your face. My child, there is a reason they have not simply rushed toward you. Freedom does not automatically erase fear. Ending one relationship does not instantly heal every wound. Your soulmate may still be dealing with guilt, confusion, embarrassment, family pressure, or the fear that you will reject them after everything that happened. They may wonder whether you still care. They may ask themselves whether too much time has passed. They may fear that you have already moved on. And there is something else that troubles them deeply. They know they cannot come back to you with empty promises. They know that if they return, they have to explain themselves. They have to face the questions. They have to admit where they went wrong. They have to tell you why they disappeared, why they hesitated, and why they allowed circumstances to separate you. That is why silence may still exist even after such a major decision. Silence does not always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is what happens when someone knows that the next conversation could change their entire life. Your soulmate may have rehearsed what they would say to you. They may have imagined calling you. They may have typed a message and deleted it. They may have opened your name on their phone and stared at it, without knowing what words could possibly be enough. Because how do you explain years of hidden emotions in one conversation? How do you tell someone, "I never stopped thinking about you," after behaving as if you did? How do you admit, "I chose the wrong path because I was afraid," when the consequences of that choice affected two hearts? My child, that is the emotional battle your soulmate is facing. And the one line they wrote about you was the beginning of their honesty. They may have written something simple, something that looked ordinary to another person, but to them it carried an entire history. A sentence that meant, "I still think about the person who made me feel like myself." A sentence that meant, "The one person I could never completely forget was you." A sentence that meant, even after everything changed, my heart still remembers where it felt at home. You may never know exactly what words they wrote unless they eventually tell you. But the meaning behind their action is what matters in this message. They were forced to confront the difference between the life they were living and the life their heart actually wanted. And for the first time, they stopped trying to silence that difference. My child, do not make the mistake of believing that your worth depends on whether your soulmate returns quickly. Your worth was never determined by another person's timing. You do not need to chase someone who is still learning how to be honest. You do not need to beg for an explanation. You do not need to prove that you deserve love. Let them face their own decisions. Let them carry the responsibility for the choices they made. If they truly want to return, they must come with clarity, honesty, and action, not simply emotion. Because love is not only about missing someone. Love is also about having the courage to show up differently. And that is the transformation your soulmate is beginning to understand. They are realizing that missing you is not enough. Thinking about you is not enough. Writing your name somewhere private is not enough. If they want a future with you, they will eventually have to step out of the shadows and speak. My child, something else is happening inside them. They are comparing what they once believed would make them happy with what actually made their heart feel alive. And that comparison has become impossible to ignore. The divorce may have closed a chapter, but it also opened a terrifying question: what happens now? What if the person they have been thinking about all this time is still there? What if you have moved on? What if they reach out and you no longer trust them? What if they finally confess everything and discover that you no longer feel the same? These questions may be keeping them awake. And this is why their next move may not look dramatic at first. It may begin quietly. A search for your name. A visit to your profile. A message that starts with something casual. A mutual connection. Asking about you. A small sign that seems meaningless on the surface but carries emotional weight underneath. Do not force these things to happen. Do not obsess over signs. Simply understand that when someone reaches a point of emotional honesty, their behavior eventually begins changing. My child, the person who once tried to bury their feelings may soon find that hiding them requires more energy than admitting them. The person who once convinced themselves that you were only a chapter may realize that you were the question they never answered. And that one line they wrote after signing those papers may have been the first time they admitted the truth to themselves. They may have looked at those words afterward and felt tears in their eyes. Not because they regretted ending something that was already broken, but because they finally understood how much time had been lost. They may have wondered what life would have looked like if they had been brave earlier. They may have remembered the moments when you were waiting for answers and they gave you silence. They may have remembered times when you needed reassurance and they disappeared. And now they are beginning to understand that your silence may have been a response to the pain they created. My child, there is a difference between losing someone and finally realizing their value. Sometimes people only understand what mattered after they no longer have easy access to it. Your soulmate may be experiencing that realization now. But remember this, you are not responsible for rescuing them from the consequences of their choices. If they truly value you, they will do the difficult work themselves. They will communicate. They will apologize. They will explain. They will show consistency. They will not expect you to forget everything overnight. They will understand that trust must be rebuilt through actions. And perhaps that is the real reason this message found you. Not to tell you to wait helplessly, but to remind you that what is meant for you will never require you to destroy yourself to keep it. Your soulmate's journey may be unfolding, but your journey matters too. Continue growing. Continue healing. Continue building the life you were meant to live. Because the version of you they remember may not be the version of you they meet again. You have changed. You have become stronger. You have learned what silence feels like. You have learned what uncertainty does to the heart. And if they return, they may discover that the person they once took for granted is no longer willing to accept half love. My child, the story is not finished simply because the papers were signed. Sometimes the ending of one chapter creates the first honest beginning of another. Your soulmate thought signing those papers would simply close a door. Instead, it forced them to look at the door they had spent so long refusing to open. And behind that door was your name. Your memory. Your connection. Your unanswered conversation. Your possibility. They may not know what happens next, but they know one thing now: they cannot keep pretending that you meant nothing. And that one line they wrote was their heart finally speaking after years of silence. So if you have been wondering why everything suddenly feels different, breathe. Do not chase. Do not panic. Do not assume the worst. Let the truth reveal itself through actions. If your soulmate is truly meant to return, they will not only remember you, they will find the courage to approach you with honesty. And when that moment comes, you will not have to convince them of your value. They will already know. My beloved child, remember this tonight: someone can sign papers, close doors, change their circumstances, and walk away from an entire chapter, but they cannot always command their heart to forget the person who left the deepest mark on it. Your soulmate may have tried. They may have failed. And now they are standing at the beginning of a truth they can no longer escape. The question is no longer whether they remember you. The question is whether they will finally have the courage to tell you what that one line really meant. Stay open, but stay grounded. Protect your heart, but do not close it out of fear. And if this message touched something inside you, take a deep breath and remember: what is genuine will reveal itself through truth, consistency, and action. You do not have to chase what belongs in your life. Let the next chapter unfold. Because sometimes the most unexpected ending is actually the beginning of the conversation your heart has been waiting for. My beloved child, God says, there is still something you need to understand about what happened after your soulmate signed those papers, because the moment they wrote that one line about you was not the end of their realization. It was the moment the truth became impossible for them to ignore. They had spent so long convincing themselves that they could separate their emotions from their decisions, but that day proved they could not. After everyone left and the room became quiet, your soulmate looked at those papers again. They knew the signature was real. They knew the decision could not simply be erased. But instead of feeling the relief they expected, they felt something much deeper. They felt the weight of everything they had sacrificed while trying to live a life that looked right from the outside. And then your face came into their mind. Not because someone mentioned you. Not because they were searching for a memory. You simply appeared in their thoughts, as naturally as if your heart had been waiting behind that final decision. They remembered a conversation between you that they had never completely understood at the time. They remembered something you once said. Something simple that stayed with them long after the conversation ended. Maybe you told them that you only wanted honesty. Maybe you told them that you did not need perfection, you only needed someone who would choose you without hesitation. And now, sitting there after signing those papers, they realized how much those words had meant. They realized that you had never been asking for too much. You had simply been asking the wrong person at the wrong time to be brave. My child, this realization hurt them. Because when people finally understand the truth, they also have to face the consequences of the moments when they ignored it. Your soulmate began remembering every opportunity they had to speak to you and didn't. Every message they almost sent. Every time they saw your name and decided to wait. Every moment. They wondered where you were but refused to ask. Every time they told themselves, maybe. Someday, without realizing that someday could become years. And suddenly, the past was no longer a collection of memories. It became a list of choices. Choices they could no longer change. That is why their emotions became so intense. They were not only thinking about you. They were thinking about the version of themselves that had been too afraid to choose honestly. And then something happened that they did not expect. They began wondering whether you still had room for them in your life. That question frightened them more than the divorce itself. Because ending a relationship was a decision they could control. Knowing whether you would accept them again was completely outside their control. They could sign documents. They could change their circumstances. They could walk away from an old life. But they could not control your heart. And for the first time, your soulmate understood that you might not be waiting. You might have healed. You might have changed. You might have learned to live without them. You might have finally stopped expecting the phone to ring. And that possibility shook them deeply. My child, there is a strange moment that happens when someone realizes the person they thought would always be there may actually become unreachable. That is the moment when regret becomes real. Your soulmate may have thought that because you cared deeply, you would always leave the door open. But time teaches people differently. Love can remain in the heart while access disappears from a person's life. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that if they want another chance, they cannot simply appear and expect everything to return to the way it was. They will have to earn their place. They will have to explain the silence. They will have to face the pain. They will have to admit what they did and why they did it. And perhaps the hardest part is that they know you deserve an explanation. My child, they may have rehearsed this conversation many times already. In their mind, they imagine standing in front of you and saying everything they were too afraid to say before. They imagine telling you that they never completely stopped caring. They imagine telling you that they thought they could bury the connection. They imagine admitting that they chose security over truth because they were afraid of what would happen if they followed their heart. But then another fear appears. What if you look at them and say, "Why now?" That question may be haunting them. Why now? After so much time? Why now, after so much silence? Why now, after you were forced to pick yourself up and move forward? And the answer is uncomfortable. Because sometimes people do not become honest when they want to. They become honest when they can no longer run from themselves. Your soulmate reached that point when they signed those papers. The old excuses suddenly stopped working. The life they had been using as a reason to stay away was changing. The barriers that once seemed permanent were beginning to disappear. And with those barriers disappearing, your memory became louder. My child, there is another detail you need to understand. The line they wrote about you was not necessarily meant to be seen by anyone. That is exactly why it mattered. People can perform emotions when others are watching. But when someone writes something privately, when there is no audience and no reward, the words often reveal what they truly believe. Your soulmate wrote because they needed somewhere for the truth to exist. They could not yet say it to you, so they put it on paper. They could not yet make the call, so they wrote the feeling down. They could not yet face the consequences of speaking, so they allowed the pen to say what their mouth could not. And once the words were there, they stared at them. They may have read them more than once. They may have wondered whether they should keep them or destroy them. But even if the paper disappeared, the realization would remain. You had become part of the truth they could no longer erase. My child, perhaps this is why you have been feeling like something is unfinished. Not because you are supposed to stop living your life and wait for someone, but because unfinished emotional stories often leave a different kind of silence behind them. You may have accepted that the connection ended, yet somewhere inside, you still felt that there were words that had never been spoken. And perhaps there are. But your peace cannot depend on hearing them. Your life cannot be placed on hold until another person becomes courageous. You must keep moving forward. If they return, let them meet the stronger version of you that grew while they were gone. Let them see that you survived the uncertainty. Let them understand that your heart is valuable. My child, your soulmate may also be experiencing something they never expected, jealousy over a future they cannot control. They may wonder whether someone else will meet you. Whether someone else will give you the consistency they failed to give. Whether someone else will hear your laugh, hold your hand, protect your peace, and make you forget the pain they caused. And that thought may be forcing them to confront an uncomfortable truth. They cannot keep assuming that you will remain emotionally available forever. They have to act if they want to be part of your future. But remember, action is the only thing that should convince you. Not dreams. Not signs. Not promises. Not emotional words sent late at night. Real love eventually becomes visible. It makes plans. It communicates. It takes responsibility. It shows consistency. Your soulmate may be approaching that realization now. And when they finally reach out, the first conversation may not be dramatic. It might begin with a simple message, a question, a memory, a hesitant, "How have you been?" But beneath those ordinary words could be an enormous emotional battle. They may be testing whether the door is completely closed. They may be trying to understand whether you would even respond. And if that moment comes, my child, do not answer from desperation. Answer from peace. You do not need to punish them, but you also do not need to rescue them. Let them speak. Let them explain. Let them show you who they have become. Because the person who returns must be different from the person who left. My child, there is one more truth hidden inside this entire situation. Your soulmate may have believed that leaving you behind would make their life easier. Instead, it forced them to live with the question of what might have happened if they had chosen differently. And that question followed them. It appeared during quiet nights. It appeared when they heard certain songs. It appeared when something reminded them of you. It appeared when they saw couples who seemed genuinely happy and wondered whether they had walked away from something rare. They may have tried to dismiss those thoughts, but the more they resisted, the stronger they became. And now, after signing those papers, they have fewer distractions from the truth. The old chapter is closing. The excuses are disappearing. And your memory is standing in the space that remains. My child, do not misunderstand this message. It does not mean every person who signs divorce papers will return to someone from their past. It means that major life decisions can force people to confront emotions they have avoided. Your soulmate must make their own choices. You must make yours. But if their actions begin aligning with the feelings they have hidden, you will notice. You will not have to chase the evidence. You will not have to decode every little thing. Their behavior will become clearer. Their communication will become more direct. Their intentions will become easier to understand. And that is when you will know whether this is truly a new beginning or simply another emotional chapter that needs closure. My beloved child, something that once looked like the end may have become the moment your soulmate finally stopped lying to themselves. They signed the papers, but then they wrote about you. They thought they were closing a door, but their heart immediately reminded them of another door they had never truly closed. And now they are standing between the past they chose and the future they secretly wondered about. What happens next depends on courage. It depends on honesty. It depends on whether they are willing to turn private feelings into public action. So do not chase them. Do not beg for the message. Do not spend every night waiting. Live. Grow. Smile again. Let your life become so full that if they return, they are not coming back to save you, you are simply deciding whether they are worthy of walking beside you. Because my child, the greatest transformation is not that your soulmate finally remembers you. The greatest transformation is that you finally remember your own worth. And when you truly understand that, you will no longer fear whether they come back. You will know that whatever happens next must meet the standard of the heart you worked so hard to heal.